Hello, everyone. My name is Rick van Bruggen from Neotechnology, and here we are recording another podcast session for our Graphistania podcast. And today I have a very interesting guest on the podcast from Germany, from Dresden, and that's Sascha Peukert. Hi, Sascha.
Hi.
Hi, Sascha. Well, I know you're a master's student at the Technische Universität Dresden.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
I tried to pronounce it correctly, but would you mind introducing yourself a little bit to our listeners, please?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a student from Dresden, currently finishing up my studies, Master Computer Science. Um, I mainly focused around software engineering and database systems, of course, and currently writing my thesis about Neo4j.
Wow, and then I think one of our dear friends who actually started this podcast with me, Michael Hunger, is part of that work, right?
Yeah, he's one of my advisors.
Oh, super. Yeah, well, Michael is a dear friend. So, I mean, what's your thesis about, Sasha? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I write about graph views using the example of Neo4j. So if you have relational database systems, you have this functionality called views. Views are just queries stored in a database which can be called upon or reused by other queries. And what's cool about that is you can configure access to those views and also to the tables themselves. So you can permit one's access to the table, but you can permit access. You can allow access to, for example, a view that only shows certain parts of the table or joint tables, and you don't have that kind of functionality in Neo4j right now. But I'm working on establishing that.
You're actually implementing some of that.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm looking forward to that. And you're supposed to graduate this summer, right?
Nah, not really. Um,
Okay.
it will be around February,
Okay, all right. Well,
so I just started on that.
okay. Well, good luck. Good luck. So,
Thank you.
so how did you get into graphs, Sasha? Can you tell us a little bit about that? And what's your interest in it, and why do you like them?
The first time I came in contact with graphs, other than our first semester math course, was in December of 2013. I was attending a meeting of the Java user group Saxony, and I heard Dirk Mahler talk about his new graph-based code analysis tool called jQuery.
Yep. No, JQ
JQ
Assistant.
Assistance.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I've interviewed Dirk for the podcast as well. Yep.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, yeah.
And after that, I really was hooked about on Neo4j and Cypher in particular. It was just really cool to see that you can emphasize the relationships about data and not have to deal with all this joint problematic that relational database systems come come with.
Yeah. And what have you used it for? I mean, what is the type of work that you've been using it for? I've read your Wikipedia graph gist, which is very similar to something I did, right?
Yeah.
But what have you used it for? What have been some of your use cases?
Um, well, just a little experience with my Wikipedia data set, for example. I also did a student research project on parallel graph algorithms on Neo4j, um,
Oh,
looking.
tell us more about that. What was that?
I tried to show how to um, add more code to the Neo4j server in a way that you can call upon that, and also emphasized on how you can parallelize this code so it will run more efficiently, quicker, order of things. Um, but sadly, that was prior to Neo 3.0, so I don't have procedures available.
Well, maybe it's time to revisit it then, Sascha.
Yeah, I'm thinking about starting a few blog posts about that project because I sadly wrote in German and therefore nobody has ever read it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's always a problem. I mean, for me as well, I have to first force myself to write in English because otherwise, yeah, it just doesn't get read as much, right?
Yeah.
But so that parallelization sounds really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of work that's been going on in the procedures ecosystem since well, basically since last April, right? And a lot of interesting things going on there. So what does the future hold for you, Sascha? And where do you see this going? What are the cool things on the horizon?
That's a really good question. For me, it's finishing my work.
No
Um,
holidays, all work, right?
no holidays, sadly.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but about Neo and graphs, I guess this whole industry will just become bigger and much more important than it already is, and we will see. I guess we will see lots of new interesting use cases with my GraphGIS Wikipedia game. I try to um, distance myself from those traditional use cases, and I think we will see much more diverse things done with graphs, like the things about Panama paper.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the Wikipedia challenge or game that you wrote about, it's a little bit of a silly game in a way, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
also
of course.
but it's also really interesting because you can ask questions that it would be extremely difficult to ask in any other database, right? If you tell someone, what is the connection between two things, how do you do that in SQL? It's almost impossible, right? You have to basically hypothesize on all the possible connections, and then the database will say yes or no. But you can't really say what are the connections.
Hmm.
It's actually a very interesting example that you find use cases for, in banking, in fraud, in whatever. It's actually very representative, I think. Sorry to do all the talking here, but
No, no, you're absolutely right. It's so obvious if you start working with graphs that so much data is just a graph.
yeah,
And
it's fascinating, right?
yeah,
It's one of those things that we should have a chat about over a beer someday.
I'd like that.
Yes. Well, Sascha, thank you so much for coming online. As you know, I keep these podcasts fairly short, but we'll put some links to your work on the transcription page when we publish the podcast, and then hopefully people can enjoy or Google Translate some of your work. That would be interesting, I think. Thanks a lot, Sascha.
Thanks for having me.
Have a nice day.
You too.